Hello, everyone, and welcome to Zoho Finance Masterclass. This is Varun Singh, and I welcome you to yet another session on Zoho Books. Before we start, a quick introduction about the Zoho Finance Suite. We have Zoho Books, Zoho Invoice, Zoho Expense, Inventory, Subscriptions, and Checkout. Basically, using all these financial tools, you can manage your business's back office operations. However, in this particular session, the focus is on books. So, Books is a cloud accounting application through which you can manage your finances, right from receivables, payables, inventory tracking to expense management. Everything you can take care using Zoho Books. On top of that, you can also file your GST returns if you happen to be from India. Now, this is the core structure that we have followed so far, right from setting up the opening balances, customizing templates, user roles, managing your inventory, streamlining your sales and purchases, and finally, today we are talking about understanding banking. So, what is banking in the accounting context? Banking can be anything, right from data entry to matching transaction, categorizing them, and at the end of the day, reconciling your accounts so that you can be tax ready. So, if banking is so important, how are we doing it at present? So, we have some stats for you. We took it from KPMG study. So, it says that 65% of businesses they use manual methods to take care of banking. This involves using spreadsheets. Then, close to 20.5 days are spent on reconciliation annually. And lastly, $1.8 million are spent on getting your accounts ready if you use spreadsheets. This number is, however, applicable to a $100 million firm. So you can apportion it accordingly for your company. So if you do all of this manually, how does it feel? It feels to be boring. It's definitely time consuming and tedious. It's a monotonous process. Imagine you doing it every day, day in, day out, with the Excel file right in front of you. It involves a lot of manual workload. It is definitely error prone, challenging, and you often feel there is a need for a specialist who can fasten the entire process. So that brings us to the topic understanding banking module of Zoho Books. It's a very important module within Books, and I guarantee you that it will actually streamline the way you do banking for your business. So we have the agenda here. It starts with setting up the banking module. Second, handling banking within Books. Then we have something for ICICI Bank customers, so stay tuned. And we have a big surprise for you, so you can improve the way you do your business by leaps and bounds. And lastly, we talk about this integration that we have with Perfios. Setting up the banking module. Why do you need to set up the banking module in the first place? That's the first question that comes to your mind. You are probably happy doing it on spreadsheets or doing it manually, but then that doesn't work in the long run. As your business grows, you'll have more and more transactions. Imagine if you have a dedicated resources, if you have a dedicated resource just to enter a transaction in your accounting package and get it reconciled, it's so time consuming. On top of that, you have to pay that extra resource as well. So what we do in Zoho Books is that we let you connect with your bank account directly. So next time when you connect your bank account with Zoho Books, we'll automatically fetch all the bank transactions in the books, and then using the artificial intelligence of the system, you can match them, you can reconcile them, and you can categorize them easily. So that does saves a lot of time for you. So I'll show you how it's done automatically first. So on the left hand side of Zoho Books, you see all the modules. Within the module list, go to the banking module. When you click on the banking module on the right hand top corner, you see add a bank or a credit card. When you click on it, you will be redirected to this particular screen. Select the bank from the list. As you can see, some of the most popular banks for the Indian region is listed here. So we have ICICI Bank, State Bank, Kotak Mahindra and SDFC Bank. All these banks are listed here. If you don't find your bank in this list, you can always click on the drop down and select it from the drop down list. When you select a bank from the popular list or from the list, which is a drop down list, you need to enter the credentials. That includes your username, password, and will also ask you to verify your password. Once that is done, you can start fetching your transaction from the last 90 days. So as you can see, instead of you manually entering all the transaction in Zoho Books, it gets automatically fetched into Books saving you tons of time. So as of now, we let you fetch transaction for the last 90 days. Next, we talk about connecting to your bank manually. So in case if your bank is not there in the list, or if you don't want to actively fetch transactions through Zoho Books, you can also do it manually. All you need to do is click on enter your account manually, and when you click on this particular button, you will be redirected to this page where you need to enter the details about the bank. So in this particular example and going forward, we take Kotak Mahindra as an example. So enter the account number, the bank name and the routing number, and you are set. So next thing what you'll see is for the banks that are configured automatically, you'll see this green color feed icon, which basically shows that it's automatically connected using books, and every time, once in a day, we will fetch all your bank transactions into books. On the contrary, if you don't have the feeds active, what you can do is you can import those transactions manually. All you need to do is click on import statement, and then you can import the bank statements in the particular format, which is CSV or TSV or OFX, and then click on next. So all your bank transactions will be automatically pushed into Zoho Books. Assuming that now you have all the transactions into Zoho Books, which can happen either automatically or manually. So this is the screen which will come in front of you. So again, we go with the Kotak Bank current account example. So as you can see, I have fetched certain transactions directly from a bank account. It has all the information, right from vendor's name to the description and the withdrawal amount and what is the current running balance. So let's say in this particular case, you have these many transactions that are fetched. And in case there are no corresponding transactions in Zoho Books, you can add a new transaction then and there itself by clicking on the add transaction button. So we have different categories here, money in and money out. Click on the relevant option and create a corresponding transaction for that. So this is how you create and set up banking module within Zoho Books. It's as simple as a pie. Next, we talk about matching transactions. Now, you have transactions within books. You have already fetched transactions from your bank. Now, moving forward, moving one step closer to reconciliation, your job is to match transactions. So, matching transactions can happen in Zoho Books by two means. One is best match, and the second option is possible matches. So, this is where the artificial intelligence of the system comes into the picture. So Zoho Books automatically identifies transactions within books that matches with the transactions that you have fetched from your bank based on the amount and also the date on which the transaction happened. Let's take an example. So as you can see, this is the screen which I've taken. There is one transaction for this particular amount which happened on March 21. And there's a corresponding transaction that was fetched from the bank account which also says the same amount, and it happened on March 21st, 2018. So this, as you can see, falls under the category called as best matches. So all you need to do is select the two transactions and click on match. So automatically the transaction is now matched. In another example, which focuses on the possible matches concept, it's like if you have a transaction, let's say of amount 2000 rupees, which was fetched from a bank account, whereas there are two transactions of amount 1500 and 1400 under the possible matches category here. So we'll show you transactions that can actually add up to rupees 2000. So in this case, since we are short of 100 rupees, which means the first transaction, assuming that was for 1500 and the next one was for 400 rupees, so it says that you're short of rupees 100. In that case, you can create a new transaction and that will actually match the entire transaction both on the left hand side and also on the right hand side, which is as simple as three transactions which are there in Zoho Books are now matching the transaction which you originally fetched from a bank account. So that is what I mean by possible matches. So this is where it's highlighted here. Next, if there are multiple possible matches and you think that you can trim it down further, we give you the option of a filter. So when you click on the filter icon here, you need to enter the amount range, the date range, the customer and the type, and then accordingly we'll trim the list for you. Next we move to the adjustments. This part I've already explained using few numbers. So if there is a transaction of rupees 2000 and there are two transactions already in books for 1500 and rupees 4000, and you see there is a pending amount of rupees 100 here, you can create a new transaction by simply clicking on create new transaction, and then that 100 rupees will be automatically adjusted here. Next is an interesting concept called as mix and match transactions. So I'll give you an example where there are two entities involved. Both A and B are suppliers in their own right. So A is supplying a good to B for rupees 8,000, whereas B is supplying a good of rupees 5,000 to A. So now in this case, the net amount due or the net amount which the customer B owes to A is only rupees 3,000. So in this particular case, we give you the option to match such a scenario in which 8,000 and 5,000 will be matched together, wherein you will also quote that 3,000 was the amount which is actually due in this case. So mix and match is also something which Zoho Books support. All you need to do is click on the transaction, and then when you click on the filter button, just check the option include withdrawals in case of deposits, and if it is a withdrawal, click on the option include deposits. Next, we have the option called filtering transactions. So let's say you have fetched all the transactions and now you want to see the transaction based on certain parameters. So we even let you filter those transactions. So the different filters that we offer are the transactions that are already matched, some which are manually added, then the transactions which are categorized, and lastly, the ones that are reconciled. Next, we move to categorizing transactions. So step number 1 is fetching of transactions, that is done. Then next step is matching transactions. So if you happen to get matches on both the sides, that is books already has accounts, has transactions, at the same time the fetch transaction from your bank also matches it. So that will either fall in best match category or the possible match category. If that's not the case, you can also categorize them manually. So we let you categorize transaction either manually or through rules. So first we'll talk about the manual categorizing of transactions. So under manual categorizing of transactions, when you select a particular transaction, we show you this particular option, and through which you have to first define the category, the expense amount, the expense account, the vendor details, GST treatment in case of India, the destination of supply, which is another important parameter to determine the GST rate, and then you can categorize it using manual option that we provide. Then we have something called as rule based, but before that we have something called split the amount as well. So let's say if there is a transaction which was fetched from Zoho Books for rupees 2,000, so it says that deposit happened for rupees 2,000, but then this amount was actually a split up of two different transactions. So you can create a split of two amounts. So you can say that you received cash in two parts, 1,000 rupees for X service you provided and 1,000 rupees for the second service that you provided. So you can always split the transactions and record it in Zoho Books. And then we move to something which is even more important. It's called as rule-based transactions. So there are certain transactions which may have the same reference or the description in this case, or it may also have a same amount. Let's take a classic example of office rent. So office rent will always have the description. Let's say when you are depositing an amount to XYZ, you have this description as office rent and the amount is always fixed, let's say 15,000. So instead of categorizing this transaction manually all the times, you can set a rule. So henceforth, whenever such a transaction happens, it will be automatically categorized as office expense. So to create a new expense, you have to go to Banking Overview tab and create a new transaction rule. When you click on New Transaction Rule, this is the page that will come in front of you. It starts with the rule name, so give it a name here to what you want to apply to. It can be a deposit or a withdrawal, and then you have to set the criterias. So like I said, first you have to give a reference number, which in this case can be office rent, and then the amount. So if the office rent amount is fixed for 15,000 rupees, it will be categorized as an expense and will be recorded under rent expense account. So this is how you create a rule-based transaction. And lastly, we move to reconciliation history. So you have fetched your transactions, you have even matched them, and you happen to categorize them as well, either manually or you can do it rule-based. Now, once everything is sorted, you can move to the final step, which is reconciliation. So to do reconciliation, go to the banking tab overview, and on that, click on the more button and choose reconciliation history. Once you click on it, you will be asked to enter the closing balance, define the start and the end date, and you will be redirected to this screen, which will give you a glimpse of the entire transactions that have happened for that particular time duration. So at the end of the day, your difference has to be zero. So once everything is reconciled, click on reconcile now and your accounts will be reconciled. So this is how simple the reconciliation process in Zoho Books is. So just to summarize, before we move on to the ICICI Bank part and Perfios, I'll tell you what all is possible within the banking model of Zoho Books. So whatever I've mentioned till now is actually relevant for all the attendees who are attending this particular webinar from different regions. This is something which is common to Zoho Books. So first thing first, you need to connect with your bank account or your credit card. Once you are done with that, you'll fetch all the transactions. This fetching happens once in 24 hours. You can also do it forcefully. I'll show it to you while I give a demo. Then you need to match the transactions. We make it simple for you through best matches and possible matches. Once that is done, we move on to categorizing transaction, which can again happen manually or rule based. And finally, we do the reconciliation. So with Zoho Books, your banking is very simplified. Then we have something called as bulk actions. So for a growing business like yours, who is carrying out transactions in hundreds and thousands, it's very difficult to keep track of it and work on the transaction individually. So we give you the options to perform bulk actions. So these are the things that you can do. You can exclude, you can unmatch, you can categorize, you can uncategorize, you can delete and restore. So let's say while importing transactions from your bank account, you have duplicate transactions which are actually not relevant. So what we do is that we give you an option to select multiple transactions and click on exclude button. So these particular transactions, the duplicate transactions won't be considered. So you can always exclude the duplicate transactions. Also, when you match transactions manually, we give you the option to unmatch them again. So using the filters, simply select the match transactions, and then if you select multiple options, we give you the option to unmatch as highlighted in this particular diagram. Next, we talk about categorization and uncategorization. So let's say if you have multiple transactions, just select them and we show you the option to categorize them. Similarly, if you have categorized multiple transactions in the past, you can also uncategorize them. Then if you have added certain transactions manually, you can always delete them. So simply select those transactions and click on delete. And lastly, if you have excluded transactions, you can now restore it. So select the transactions and click on restore, and all those transactions will now be restored. So we now move to the next topic, which is called as Introduction to Connected Banking with ICICI Bank. Zoho Books very recently did an integration with ICICI Bank to revolutionize the way we do business banking. So you must be wondering, what's so special about this integration and why did we do it in the first place? So we have addressed some of the common problems faced by business owners, that is, raising working capital, getting paid by the customers, making payments to the suppliers. And for that, we have brought about this convergence between banking and ERP. Yes, Zoho Books can be used as an ERP solution because it is integrated with Zoho Expense, which is an expense management software, and Zoho Inventory, which is an inventory and order fulfillment software. So all of that, when it comes to Zoho Books, it becomes an ERP, and we bring the bank inside Zoho Books, so that brings about the convergence. So with this one-of-its-kind unique integration, what can you achieve? You can directly raise working capital loan using Zoho Books. You can collect payments from customers using our Easy Pay integration. Next, you can pay suppliers directly. And lastly, you can also reimburse your employees. So we'll cover it one by one, starting with business loan request. So raising a working capital, you don't have to go to the bank anymore. Within Zoho Books, you need to fill out this form. And then based on your financial situation, you will be given a loan, or it may be disapproved as well based on how healthy your financial situation is. Next, we move to collecting payments from customers. So like I said, we are integrated with EasyPay. It's an ICICI product. So all your customers can make payment using EasyPay. It can happen to credit card, debit card, NEFT, RTGS, or even UPI. Then another important feature that comes with this integration is making bill payments. So right now in the present scenario, when you have to make a payment to a supplier, you see the amount here, then you go to the net banking portal and then clear the amount. Whereas using Zoho Books and ICICI, you can directly make the payment. So no more switching between multiple tabs. And lastly, we move to employee reimbursements. So this particular functionality is applicable to Zoho Expense, which is an expense reporting and management software. So let's say if you have a sales team who are traveling and they submit you expense reports. So in this case, you can directly reimburse them using the ICICI integration. So that's the beauty of this integration. You don't have to switch to your net banking portal and clear the dues or accept payments from your customers. Everything is smooth and streamlined. You can raise working capital from books itself. At the same time, you can collect and receive payments and even make employee reimbursements using Zoho Expense. And lastly, we move to importing bank statements with Perfios. For ones who don't know what Perfios is, it's basically a fintech company based out of India. So in Zoho Books, what we do is we are integrated with Yodlee to fetch your financial transactions. So there are certain customers who have accounts with Perfios. So Perfios basically downloads the bank statements and saves it in a PDF format. So if you don't want to use Yodlee and if you are a Perfios user, we support that as well. So just upload the bank statement that Perfios has created for you by going to import statement and choose the file from the desktop. Choose the bank name from here and lastly import the transactions. This is the exact screen that will come in front of you when you have the Perfios integration in place. And once that is done, all your transactions will be visible within Books. And lastly, we have this slide. So if you need any information to get started, please feel free to give us a call. The call number and the email ID mentioned here are relevant for the Indian audience. So you can give us a call on 1-800-123-7711. And also you can drop us a mail at support.india@zohobooks.com. For my friends joining from other parts of the world, you can drop us a mail at support@zohobooks.com. And we have a comprehensive help document as well. And also frequently asked questions we have compiled here. So that's it with the banking module of Zoho Books. Please feel free to ask me more questions. And now I'll move to the demo part. So for the new ones who haven't used Zoho Books, this is how the dashboard of Zoho Books looks. With dashboard, I mean to say that all your financial information is visible here itself. It gives you a top level view, right from your receivables, payables, cash flow, income and expense, your top expenses, and more importantly, if you have connected any of your banks and credit cards, it will be visible here in this particular section. On the left hand side are your modules. When I go to the banking module, this particular screen is the banking dashboard. I have two banks connected as of now, HDFC and Kotak Mahindra Bank. To create or add a new bank, simply click on this button. I've populated some of the popular banks here for the Indian market. Choose from here or you can select other banks from the drop down. Also, you can do it manually by clicking here and then enter the relevant details. Again, when I go back to the banking module, let's take Kotak Mahindra Bank. It says that it has 9 uncategorized transactions and the amount in bank and the amount in Zoho Books right now doesn't match. So when I go to Kotak Mahindra Bank, it shows me all the uncategorized transactions which I have. There are certain transactions here. When you click on any transaction, first thing first, like I said, you need to first match it. So right now there's no best match available, so it doesn't show me. Neither are there any possible matches. Let's say if I click some other transaction. When I click on this amount, when I click on this transaction of rupees 2000, it shows me a possible match transaction. So when I select this transaction by clicking on select, as you can see, there is a pending amount of rupees 1500. I need to create a new transaction to match it thoroughly. This is about matching. Then for certain transactions which are not there in Zoho Books, like I said, you have to categorize them manually. When you click on it, since this particular transaction is a withdrawal, I have to select the category. It cannot be an expense, or it cannot be an income, so it can be either of these categories. Then choose the expense account, choose the type of good or a service it is. Accordingly, the HSC or HSN code will appear. Select the vendor information, the GST treatment, and the destination supply place. And thus you can save it once you enter all the relevant details. Next thing, what I would like to show you is setting up the bank rules. And yeah, I was also talking about refreshing feeds. So you can also refresh feeds. So by default, Zoho Books fetches transaction once in a day. You can also do it forcefully by clicking on refresh feeds. Next is about setting up the transaction rules. When you click on setting up the transaction rules, you have to click on new rule, and then this particular screen will appear. And then you can use the same reference which I gave for office rent. So give a rule name, office rent, apply it to a withdrawal, and then choose the criteria here, record it as an expense, and finally select the account, which in this case can be office rent. Click on save. So next time whenever a transaction happens with the parameters that you have defined, the transaction will be automatically categorized as an office rent. Next, we again move to the banking overview screen. From here, I'll select Kotak Mahindra Bank, and I'll show you how the reconciliation process happens. You have to click on the More button and then Reconciliation History. Here, when you click on Reconcile Accounts, we'll ask you to enter the closing balance and also the relevant start date and end date. Let's say if I enter a random number here, the closing balance for me is 1,200, 1,000, 12,000. And then it will show me all the transactions that are matched till date and all the transactions which are yet to be matched. And lastly, as you can see, it shows the difference in amount. Once you find that all the accounts are properly reconciled, I'll ask you to click on this particular button which says Reconcile. And once you click on Reconcile, your accounts in Zoho Books will be reconciled. And lastly, next time when you go to the Reconcile page, it will show you that the transaction was reconciled on this particular date. So that's how you do a reconciliation in Zoho Books. So that's it from my end. If you have questions related to ICICI and Zoho Books integration, you can drop us your questions in the chat panel and we'll get back to you. Also in future, if you have any question related to Zoho Books, feel free to ask us more questions and our team will be more than happy to help you. Thank you and have a great day ahead.